Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today we are going to talk about something very powerful, the blueprint of your behavior. Because the truth is, your life is not random. Your actions are not random. Everything you do follows a pattern. The way you think, the way you react, the way you make decisions, all of it is part of your internal blueprint. And if you don't understand this blueprint, you will keep repeating the same mistakes. But once you understand it, you can change your life. In this video, we will break down the patterns that define you and how to take control of them. So, watch this video till the end, because this can completely change the way you see yourself. Let's begin. Lesson 1. Awareness of your patterns. The first step to changing your behavior is awareness. Now understand this clearly. You cannot change what you do not see. Most people live on autopilot. They react without thinking. They repeat habits without noticing. They follow the same patterns every day. And because of this, their life never changes. Now imagine this. You get angry in the same situations. You procrastinate in the same way. You feel the same emotions again and again. What does this mean? It means you are following a pattern. Now here's something very important. Your behavior is not random. It is programmed. Now let's go deeper. Every action you take comes from a pattern in your mind. Now imagine this. Someone criticizes you. You react immediately. You feel hurt. You feel angry. Why? Because your mind has a pattern. Now imagine another situation. You face a challenge. You delay. You avoid. You overthink. Again, a pattern. Now here is the powerful shift. Once you see the pattern, you gain control. Now let's go even deeper. Awareness means observing yourself. Not judging, not blaming, just observing. Now imagine this. You notice your reactions. You notice your habits. You notice your thoughts. What happens? You become conscious. Now you are no longer on autopilot. Now here's something very important. Observation creates separation. Now imagine this. Instead of saying, I am angry, you say, I notice I am feeling angry. What happens? You create distance. Now you are not controlled by emotion. Now here is something powerful. You are not your thoughts. You are the observer of your thoughts. Now let's go even deeper. You can start asking questions. Now imagine this. Every time you react, you ask, why did I do this? What triggered me? What pattern is this? What happens? You start understanding yourself. Now your awareness increases. Now here is something very important. Self-awareness is the first step to change. Now imagine this. You live without awareness. What happens? You repeat the same life. Now imagine the opposite. You become aware. What happens? You start changing your patterns. Now here is something powerful. Awareness breaks automatic behavior. Now let's go even deeper. You can track your patterns daily. Now imagine this. At the end of the day, you reflect. What did you do? How did you react? What can you improve? What happens? You start seeing patterns clearly. Now your growth becomes faster. Now here is something very important. Small awareness creates big change. Now imagine this. You improve just one pattern. What happens? Your life starts improving. Now here is something powerful. Change starts with noticing. Now let me give you a powerful line to remember. You cannot change your behavior until you understand the patterns behind it. So from today, don't live on autopilot. Don't ignore your habits. Don't repeat blindly. Observe yourself. Understand your patterns. Become aware. Because when you become aware, you take the first step to changing your life. Lesson 2. Identify your triggers. The second step to understanding your behavior is identify your triggers. Now understand this clearly. Every behavior starts with a trigger. Nothing happens randomly. There is always something that comes first. A situation, a person, a thought, and that starts your reaction. Now let's go deeper. Most people focus only on their actions. They say, I get angry, I feel stressed, I procrastinate. But they don't ask, what caused it? Now imagine this. You feel angry. What happened before that? Someone said something didn't go your way. You felt disrespected. That is the trigger. Now here is something very important. If you don't understand the trigger, you cannot control the reaction. Now here is the powerful shift. Control the trigger, and you control the behavior. Now let's go even deeper. Triggers can be external or internal. External triggers are outside you. People, situations, environment. Now imagine this. Someone criticizes you. What happens? You feel hurt. That is an external trigger. Now internal triggers are inside you. Thoughts, memories, beliefs. Now imagine this. You remember something negative. What happens? Your mood changes. That is an internal trigger. Now here is something very important. Both types of triggers shape your behavior. Now let's go even deeper. Different people react differently to the same trigger. Now imagine this. Two people face the same criticism. One gets angry. One stays calm. Why? Because their internal patterns are different. Now here is something powerful. Your reaction depends on your mindset. Now let's go even deeper. Triggers are connected to your past experiences. Now imagine this. Someone ignores you. You feel hurt. Why? Because maybe in the past, you felt ignored. Now here is something very important. Your past creates your triggers. Now here is something powerful. Unresolved experiences control present behavior. Now let's go even deeper. You must start observing your triggers. Now imagine this. Every time you react, you pause, and you ask, what triggered me? Why did I feel this way? What happened just before this? What happens? You start seeing patterns. Now your awareness increases. Now here is something very important. Awareness of triggers creates control. Now imagine this. You know your trigger. What happens? You prepare yourself. Now your reaction changes. Now here is something powerful. Preparation reduces reaction. Now let's go even deeper. You can create space between trigger and response. Now imagine this. Something triggers you. Instead of reacting immediately, you pause. You take a breath. You think. What happens? You gain control. Now here is something very important. Your power is in the pause. Now here is something powerful. You cannot always control triggers, but you can control your response. Now let's go even deeper. You can also reduce triggers. Now imagine this. Certain people always drain you. What can you do? Limit your time with them. Now imagine this. Social media makes you compare. What can you do? Reduce usage. What happens? Your triggers decrease. Now your mind becomes calm. Now here is something very important. Protect your environment. Now here is something powerful. A healthy environment creates a healthy mind. Now let's go even deeper. You can also reframe triggers. Now imagine this. Instead of thinking, they are attacking me, you think, they are expressing their opinion. What happens? Your reaction becomes calm. Now your emotions stay stable. Now here is something very important. Your interpretation changes your reaction. Now here is something powerful. Change the meaning. Change the feeling. Now let me give you a powerful line to remember. Every reaction has a trigger. And when you understand your triggers, you take control of your behavior. So from today, don't just react. Don't ignore what causes your emotions. Don't repeat patterns blindly. Observe your triggers. Understand them. Pause before reacting. Because when you control your triggers, you start controlling your life. Lesson 3. Break negative patterns. The third step to changing your behavior is break negative patterns. Now understand this clearly. Awareness shows you the pattern, but action breaks the pattern. Now let's go deeper. Every person has patterns. Some are positive, some are negative. Now imagine this. You delay important work. You overthink small problems. You react emotionally in the same situations. What is this? A pattern. And if you don't break it, it becomes your identity. Now here's something very important. Repeated behavior becomes who you are. Now here is the powerful shift. Change your patterns, and you change your identity. Now let's go even deeper. Negative patterns feel normal because you repeat them daily. Now imagine this. You procrastinate every day. What happens? It feels natural. Now imagine this. You react with anger often. What happens? It feels normal. But just because something feels normal does not mean it is right. Now here is something very important. Comfort is not always growth. Now let's go even deeper. Breaking patterns is not easy because your brain likes familiarity. Now imagine this. You try to change. What happens? Your mind resists. You feel uncomfortable. You feel lazy. You feel like going back. Now here is something very powerful. Discomfort is part of change. Now here is the powerful shift. If it feels uncomfortable, you are growing. Now let's go even deeper. To break a pattern, you must interrupt it. Now imagine this. You always check your phone when you feel bored. That is a pattern. Now what can you do? Replace it. Instead of using your phone, you take a walk, you read something, you do something productive. What happens? The pattern breaks. Now here is something very important. You don't remove a habit. You replace it. Now here is something powerful. Replacement creates transformation. Now let's go even deeper. You must catch the pattern early. Now imagine this. You feel the urge to delay work. Instead of following it, you act immediately. What happens? You break the cycle. Now your brain learns something new. Now here is something very important. The earlier you act, the easier it is to change. Now here is something powerful. Awareness plus action equals change. Now let's go even deeper. Consistency is the key. Now imagine this. You break a pattern once. What happens? It helps. But it is not enough. Now imagine the opposite. You break it again and again. What happens? The old pattern becomes weak. The new pattern becomes strong. Now here is something very important. Repetition rewires your brain. Now here is something powerful. What you repeat, you become. Now let's go even deeper. You must be patient. Now imagine this. You try to change quickly. What happens? You feel frustrated. Now imagine the opposite. You improve slowly. What happens? You stay consistent. Now here's something very important. Real change takes time. Now here's something powerful. Slow progress is still progress. Now let's go even deeper. You must forgive yourself. Now imagine this. You try to change, but sometimes you fail. What happens? You feel bad. Now imagine the opposite. You accept the mistake and try again. What happens? You continue improving. Now here is something very important. Perfection is not required. Persistence is required. Now here is something powerful. Keep going, even after failure. Now let's go even deeper. You can create new positive patterns. Now imagine this. You replace negative habits with positive ones. Reading instead of scrolling. Action instead of delay. Calm response instead of anger. What happens? Your life changes. Now here is something very important. Your habits shape your future. Now here is something powerful. A better pattern creates a better life. Now let me give you a powerful line to remember. Break your negative patterns, because the life you want is hidden behind the habits you need to change. So from today, don't repeat blindly. Don't stay comfortable in bad habits. Don't ignore your patterns. Interrupt them. Replace them. Repeat new actions. Because when you break negative patterns, you don't just change behavior. You transform your entire life. Lesson 4. Build positive behavior systems. The fourth step to changing your behavior is build positive behavior systems. Now understand this clearly. Success is not built on motivation. It is built on systems. Now let's go deeper. Most people depend on motivation. They feel inspired one day. They take action. Then they stop. And because of this, their progress is inconsistent. Now imagine this. You only act when you feel motivated. What happens? Some days you work, some days you don't. Now your growth becomes unstable. Now imagine the opposite. You follow a system. What happens? You act daily, even without motivation. Now here is something very important. Systems remove dependency on mood. Now here is the powerful shift. Don't depend on motivation. Create a system. Now let's go even deeper. A system is a simple structure that guides your behavior. Now imagine this. You decide, I will read for 10 minutes every morning. That is a system. Now imagine this. You say, I will work for 30 minutes without distraction. That is a system. Now here is something very important. Small systems create big results. Now here is something powerful. Consistency comes from structure. Now let's go even deeper. Systems make decisions easier. Now imagine this. You don't have a system. What happens? You think too much. You delay. You feel confused. Now imagine the opposite. You have a system. What happens? You know what to do. Now you act quickly. Now here is something very important. Clarity reduces procrastination. Now here is something powerful. When the path is clear, action becomes easy. Now let's go even deeper. Your environment is part of your system. Now imagine this. Your environment is full of distractions. What happens? You lose focus. Now imagine the opposite. You create a clean and focused environment. What happens? Your productivity improves. Now here is something very important. Your environment shapes your behavior. Now here is something powerful. Design your environment. And you design your actions. Now let's go even deeper. You must make good habits easy. Now imagine this. You want to read, but your book is far away. What happens? You don't read. Now imagine the opposite. Your book is in front of you. What happens? You read easily. Now here is something very important. Reduce friction for good habits. Now here is something powerful. Make it easy to do the right thing. Now let's go even deeper. You must make bad habits difficult. Now imagine this. You want to reduce phone usage. What can you do? Keep your phone away. Turn off notifications. What happens? You use it less. Now here is something very important. Increase friction for bad habits. Now here is something powerful. Make it hard to do the wrong thing. Now let's go even deeper. Tracking is also important. Now imagine this. You track your habits daily. What happens? You become aware. Now you stay consistent. Now here is something very important. What you track, you improve. Now here is something powerful. Measurement creates progress. Now let's go even deeper. Systems create identity. Now imagine this. You follow your system daily. What happens? You become disciplined. Now your identity changes. Now here is something very important. You don't just do the habit. You become the person. Now here is something powerful. Action shapes identity. Now let's go even deeper. You must keep your system simple. Now imagine this. Your system is too complex. What happens? You stop. Now imagine the opposite. Your system is simple. What happens? You continue. Now here is something very important. Simple systems last longer. Now here is something powerful. Consistency beats complexity. Now let me give you a powerful line to remember. Build systems, not excuses, because your daily structure decides your future. So from today, don't depend on motivation. Don't act randomly. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Create simple systems. Follow them daily. Improve them slowly. Because when your systems become strong, your behavior becomes automatic, and your life becomes powerful. Lesson 5. Reprogram your identity. The fifth step to changing your behavior is reprogram your identity. Now understand this clearly. Your behavior does not come from your goals. It comes from your identity. Now let's go deeper. Most people say, I want to be successful. I want to be disciplined. I want to change my life. But they still think, I am lazy. I am not good enough. I always fail. Now imagine this. Your actions follow your identity. If you believe you are lazy, you act like a lazy person. If you believe you are weak, you avoid challenges. Now here is something very important. You act like the person you believe you are. Now here is the powerful shift. Change your identity, and your behavior will follow. Now let's go even deeper. Your identity is built from repetition. Now imagine this. You do something again and again. What happens? You start believing, this is who I am. Now here is something powerful. Repeated actions create identity. Now imagine this. You read daily. What happens? You start thinking, I am a learner. Now imagine this. You work consistently. What happens? You start believing, I am disciplined. Now here is something very important. Identity is not fixed. It is created. Now let's go even deeper. You must start with small identity shifts. Now imagine this. Instead of saying, I want to exercise, you say, I am a person who takes care of my body. What happens? Your actions align with your identity. Now here is something powerful. Identity creates consistency. Now let's go even deeper. You must prove your new identity. Now imagine this. You say, I am disciplined, but you don't act. What happens? Your mind does not believe it. Now imagine the opposite. You take small actions daily. What happens? You build evidence. Now your belief becomes strong. Now here is something very important. Your brain believes what you do, not what you say. Now here is something powerful. Action creates belief. Now let's go even deeper. You must repeat your identity daily. Now imagine this. You remind yourself, I am improving. I am consistent. I am focused. What happens? Your mindset changes. Now your behavior follows. Now here is something very important. Your self-talk shapes your identity. Now here is something powerful. Speak to yourself with intention. Now let's go even deeper. You must remove old identity labels. Now imagine this. You keep saying, I am lazy. I am unlucky. I can't do this. What happens? You stay stuck. Now imagine the opposite. You remove those labels. What happens? You create space for growth. Now here is something very important. Stop repeating negative identity. Now here is something powerful. You are not your past. You are your choices. Now let's go even deeper. Your environment also shapes your identity. Now imagine this. You stay around people who are negative. What happens? You start thinking like them. Now imagine the opposite. You stay around growth-focused people. What happens? Your mindset improves. Now here is something very important. Your environment influences your identity. Now here is something powerful. Choose who you become by choosing your environment. Now let's go even deeper. Identity change is long-term. Now imagine this. You expect instant transformation. What happens? You feel disappointed. Now imagine the opposite. You stay patient. What happens? Your identity evolves slowly. Now here is something very important. Real change takes time. Now here is something powerful. Consistency creates transformation. Now let me give you a powerful line to remember. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your identity, so become the person who can achieve what you want. So from today, don't just set goals. Don't just wish for change. Don't stay stuck in old labels. Change how you see yourself. Act like the person you want to become. Repeat it daily, because when your identity changes, your behavior becomes natural, and your life transforms completely. Lesson 6. Reinforce through environment. The sixth and final step to changing your behavior is reinforce it through your environment. Now understand this clearly. Your environment is stronger than your willpower. You may feel motivated. You may feel disciplined. But if your environment is not right, you will fall back. Now let's go deeper. Most people try to change themselves, but they don't change their surroundings. They stay in the same place, with the same habits, with the same distractions. And then they wonder why nothing changes. Now imagine this. You want to focus, but your environment is full of noise. Your phone is always near. Notifications keep coming. Distractions are everywhere. What happens? You lose focus. Now imagine the opposite. You create a clean and calm environment. No distractions, no noise, no unnecessary triggers. What happens? Focus becomes easier. Now here is something very important. Your environment shapes your behavior. Now here is the powerful shift. Don't rely only on willpower. Design your environment. Now let's go even deeper. Your surroundings send signals to your brain. Now imagine this. Your room is messy. What happens? Your mind feels messy. Now imagine the opposite. Your space is clean and organized. What happens? Your mind becomes clear. Now here is something very important. External order creates internal clarity. Now here is something powerful. Clean space, clear mind. Now let's go even deeper. People are also part of your environment. Now imagine this. You spend time with negative people. People who complain. People who avoid growth. People who distract you. What happens? You become like them. Now imagine the opposite. You spend time with focused and positive people. People who work hard. People who improve daily. People who inspire you. What happens? You grow. Now here is something very important. You become like the people around you. Now here is something powerful. Choose your circle carefully. Now let's go even deeper. Digital environment also matters. Now imagine this. Your phone is full of distractions. Social media, endless scrolling, useless content. What happens? Your attention gets destroyed. Now imagine the opposite. You control your digital space. You follow useful content. You limit screen time. What happens? Your focus improves. Now here is something very important. Your digital habits shape your brain. Now here is something powerful. Control your screen. Control your mind. Now let's go even deeper. You must design your environment for success. Now imagine this. You want to read more. What can you do? Keep a book near you. Now imagine this. You want to work more. What can you do? Create a dedicated workspace. What happens? Your behavior changes automatically. Now here is something very important. Make good habits easy. Now here is something powerful. Set your environment to support your goals. Now let's go even deeper. You must remove triggers of bad habits. Now imagine this. You want to reduce distractions. What can you do? Keep your phone away. Turn off notifications. What happens? Your bad habits decrease. Now here is something very important. Remove what weakens you. Now here is something powerful. Protect your focus at all costs. Now let's go even deeper. Environment creates consistency. Now imagine this. Everything around you supports your goals. What happens? You stay consistent. Now your behavior becomes automatic. Now here is something very important. Consistency is easier in the right environment. Now here is something powerful. Success is built in the environment you create. Now let me give you a powerful line to remember. Design your environment, because your surroundings silently shape your behavior and your future. So from today, don't stay in the wrong environment. Don't depend only on motivation. Don't ignore your surroundings. Change your space. Choose your people. Control your digital world. Because when your environment supports you, your growth becomes natural, and your success becomes inevitable. Now understand this clearly. Your life is not controlled by luck. It is controlled by patterns. Patterns of thinking. Patterns of reacting. Patterns of acting. And if you don't change these patterns, you will keep repeating the same life. But the moment you become aware, the moment you take control, everything starts to change. Because change is not about one big decision. It is about small daily shifts in your thoughts, in your habits, in your environment. So from today, observe yourself, understand your triggers, break what is holding you back, and build what moves you forward. Because you are not stuck. You are just repeating patterns. And once you change the pattern, you change your life. If you learned something valuable from this video, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell. Because we bring you powerful ideas that can transform your mindset and your life. And always remember, you don't rise by chance. You rise by design. I will see you in the next video.